Hello, and welcome to another edition of the Binge Chickens. It's been a little while since our last episode, but I'm Alex, and with me I have Lo. How are you, Lo?
I'm good, thanks, Alex. How are you?
I'm very good. I'm very good. I'm excited to be back doing another episode in our review of the revived series of Doctor Who. Back for series two, which was our first season with Billy Piper and David Tennant well, it's our only season with David Tennant and Billy
Yeah.
Piper as the pair in the TARDIS. Yeah, we're going to have a look back at the series. We're going to sort of start with our general overview of thoughts on the series. Then we'll talk about the arc for this season. And then we'll go through our favorite and least favorite episodes from this season and what we liked or didn't like about them. So I guess I'll start with what were your general thoughts on this season?
Um. Oh, that is a good question. No, I look, initial viewing way back when it first aired, I think I really enjoyed this season, but like watching it back to back, you realize that there are a lot of episodes that are kind of lacking. I mean, I really enjoyed it. I still enjoyed it. I love Rose and the Doctor together. But yeah, it's a bit I don't know, some of the episodes are a bit questionable. Some of the episodes are really good. It kind of went either way. They're either really good or just a bit like, ugh.
Yeah,
Um,
I think after how solid the first series was with Christopher Eccleston, looking
yes.
back on this season, maybe it's a bit of a controversial opinion, but I don't think that David Tennant and Billy Piper were as good a combination as we I think we're sort of colored by the fact that we watched this as kids back in 2006,
Yeah.
so we were 14, right? So it's very different to watching it now.
Yes, exactly. And yeah, I don't know. I think after watching the Eccleston series, like Billy Piper and Chris Eccleston had such good chemistry, and they just like the energy, they just bounced off each other so well. I'm not saying that Tennant and Piper don't. They do still bounce off each other, except it's just not something missing or something maybe it feels a bit forced because there is that like romance factor
I
that
was just going to say, yeah.
that colors through this. So it's not just, I mean, it's not just like two mates traveling who like really care about each other, which I feel like we got that vibe with Exton. Also, we're starting to get towards that romance vibe towards the end there. Um, I mean, it did end with the Doctor kissing Rose, so um, but I something was just a bit off.
Yeah, um I think that's it, and that's what I was going to say is I feel like this season, I mean, there's the whole kind of cute aspect that he got younger so that he could be with her sort of thing about the regeneration, but I
Mhm.
feel like it became quite a distraction having that romance, and even, I mean, even episodes that weren't focused on Rose and the Doctor, and this is going to be some kind of sacrilege because I really love this episode. We're going to talk about it a bit later, but the girl in the fireplace is very atypical of Doctor Who, where it's very much a romance story, and that's not something we're very used to. And so maybe that's sort of why the vibe this season just felt a little bit different in that sense. There was a lot more romantic subtext in a few of the episodes. So,
Yeah.
even in New Earth, when you get Cassandra, inhabiting Rose's body, and it's talking about how she wants to snog the Doctor and all that sort of thing. Just a different vibe, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. It is a different vibe, very much a different vibe. I mean, still great, still loved it. Um, like it's still up there. I just think I honestly haven't sat down and watched everything back to back, and now watching it back to back, I'm like, I definitely prefer the Eccleston Doctor with Rose.
I would,
Um,
sorry.
and I don't know if that's maybe just the storylines of the stories were different. Um, maybe like that could be a factor, or I don't know exactly what it is. I can't put my finger on it, but I mean, I still love this season. I probably prefer series one to this one.
Yeah, and look, I was going to say, I feel like the first half of this season was a lot better than the second half. I mean, we just have to look at some of the episodes in that first half, school reunion, Girl in the Fireplace, even the two-parter with the Cybermen were all, I thought, really well done episodes. Tooth and Claw as well was, a pretty fun episode as well. It's the second half of the season when you get sort of, the Idiot's Lantern, Love and Monsters, Fear Her, which are really sort of, they just sort of drag because there's not a very compelling story there, I don't think. Even The Impossible Planet and The Satan Pit felt like a really odd two-parter from the point of view of it just, it was like we started watching the Martha series now, and we had the episode 42, which felt very similar in a lot of ways to The Impossible Planet and Satan Pit, where it's sort of like they're stuck in the bulkheads and and that was one episode, and that felt much better constructed. This one just felt like it dragged.
Yeah, I think having that as a two-parter was not a mistake. I get what they're doing, but like it felt like it was probably too much for a one part, but not enough for a whole 2 episodes. I feel like the 42 episode that we just watched had more of that old school Doctor Who vibes. Even though, I mean, I know the old episodes were broken down into 4 parts, so yeah.
I guess the other sort of the aspect of this series to talk about is the series arc. We had Bad Wolf in the first season, which I thought was done really well, where it was sort of scattered in the background and then had that sort of ominous build into the final few episodes. And I suppose it's sort of similar this season with Torchwood. I mean, we do get the reference to Torchwood in, I think it's the first half of the series 1 finale with the weakest link trivia question. And then we get, I think it's even as early as the Christmas invasion, we get the comment about Torchwood, message from Torchwood to shoot down the alien ship. Then we get it much more blatantly in Tooth and Claw, where they're setting up Torchwood. I'm trying to remember back to when we watched this as like kids, and obviously after the Bad Wolf, I kind of remember it being almost a game of trying to pick what the season arc was in the next season. And with this one, I think it's a little bit more obvious in some of the episodes. Some of them are still quite sort of in the background.
I know you commented when we were watching that if we didn't have, like, we're old now, we watch TV shows with subtitles on. And if we didn't have the subtitles on, we would have missed a Torchwood reference. I know when I originally watched this in 2006, I wasn't really following the arc as much. I guess it was just, it was there.
Was it a satisfying arc for this season? I mean, I'm trying to think. I almost feel like the Cybermen parallel universe stuff has more of an influence on the finale, I guess, with Mickey and Rose's dad coming back than Torchwood necessarily. I mean, it all sort of ties in, but it did feel like there was almost 2 different parts to the arc.
Not necessarily. I did like that they got them back for the finale. That was nice after The Age of Steel and Rise of Cybermen. I thought it was a nice way to bring them in and to like connect that storyline. But I feel like I'm very dismissive of the Torchwood that is at the end of the series, because we know, like, whenever I say I think Torchwood now, I think Captain Jack and his band of merry men.
Yeah, which is kind of funny when you think that Torchwood is originally presented to us as this threat to the Doctor and almost the villains of that finale, as in terms of unleashing the Cybermen. And now, like you say, they're sort of synonymous with Jack, and they're such like a positive sort of vibe around them, or like association with them. So it's sort of flipped.
Yeah, it is. And that's the thing. I think I feel like I watched this and then watched Torchwood. So now coming back to this, when they say Torchwood, I go, oh, Jack. And then I'm like, wait, no. Other Torchwood.
Yeah. And of course we get the Freema, what's her name? Martha's
Freema.
Actress is in.
Yes. Freema Agyeman.
Yes.
Agyeman.
Who's in that 2-parter finale as her cousin, which I kind of found funny that when we see Gwen pop up, the Doctor sort of comments on the fact that she looks just like her ancestor, but there's no comment about the fact that he stripped out the headset from poor Martha's cousin in the finale for this season. But
Yes.
Doctor Who and its history of reusing actors and actresses, I guess.
Well, yeah, I mean, we end up with Amy popping up in the next, like in series 3.
Series 4, yeah.
Series 4, sorry. And
Peter Capaldi and everyone, yeah.
yeah, exactly. And they all come back. So yeah, it's interesting. I mean, we already know from watching this and any BBC show that there's a very, very small pool of actors in Britain, apparently.
Absolutely. Well, you know, the review that we did recently on Bridgerton, of course, Martha's mother is a character who pops up. Yeah. So yeah, it's lots of repetition. But look, you know, talking about series 2, what would you say was your favorite episode of this season and why?
Oh, you know what I'm going to say, because you're about to say the exact same episode.
Yeah, which is okay.
Like
you can pinch it.
It's probably like my favorite episode from all of New Who, which is Girl in the Fireplace. I don't know what it is, because I was like, it's not really that. Like, if you think about it, it's not that much of an action-packed episode. That being said, I think also like Rose from series 1 is probably one of my all-time favorite episodes as well. So I'd probably put these two together. But compared to Rose, you meet the Doctor and it's all fast-paced action, buildings are blowing up, there's aliens, attacking London on such a large scale. This is very much like Girl in the Fireplace is just the Doctor popping in and out of this girl's life, and then there's that, jumping through the mirror with the horse at the end, which is the big climax that it's kind of over. And I'm like, I can't. Again, I'm obviously doing really having a hard time today putting into words what I'm liking and disliking. But with this one, it's just I really enjoyed the episode. I guess it's got a good pacing. You kind of do fall in love with Madame Pompadour along with the Doctor, and seeing the Doctor kind of build that relationship with her is lovely. But nothing really happens. Mikey and Rose are running around an empty ship.
Mickey, yeah.
Mickey. I always call Mikey. Damn it. It's the droids have died out, so they're trying to find body parts to keep the ship running. I feel like it's a very episode, like a non-event episode, but it's also so good.
I think one of the appeals of this episode, and then also one of the appeals of Blink in the next season, is that they both sort of play with the concepts of time travel a lot more than in an ordinary episode of Doctor Who, which is funny to say when it's a time travel show. But jumping backward and forward in time, I think is an interesting concept. I think I said to you while we were watching it, this reminds me a lot of, spoilers for anyone that hasn't seen it, but the ending of Interstellar, where it's also a very similar sort of bending time around. Yeah. The finale of Interstellar was sort of a letdown after having already seen this, because I did feel like it was very much the same sort of concept. But I think also one of the big appeals of it is it's just got so many great fun lines of dialogue. Like when we get the horse roaming around the spaceship and the Doctor naming the horse, and then Rose sort of says to him, "Oh, you can't keep the horse," and he says, "Oh, well, what do you mean? I'll let you keep Mickey." Things like that.
I think it really is the dialogue that makes this episode so good. Like as I said, in terms of things blowing up and events and things like that, it's not that big of an episode, but that the dialogue is what makes it really good, and that's what Moffat is good at. And I bloody hate that my favorite episode is written by Moffat.
Well, and also as we picked up whilst watching it, with the revelations that we've seen in the current run of Doctor Who, there's a very interesting exchange between Renette and the Doctor when he's trying to read her mind, and she starts to read his mind and says, such a lonely little boy, lonely then and lonelier now, how can you bear it? Which, it can on one level just be seen as, okay, yes, the Doctor's always been alone essentially. But with the the comments about the lonely child and everything, it now starts to take
Yes.
on a greater significance. So it is interesting to see these sorts of themes woven through the show as early as this, of
Yes.
the Doctor's loneliness, his, you know, isolation, his difference, all of that.
Yes, and we see that a lot in the Moffat episodes. Like, even though he's like not the showrunner currently, his episodes that he has written all have these kind of links to when he is showrunner. So even like with the Capaldi episode, I'm assuming he was still showrunner. Then I don't think he'd left at that point.
No, he was Capaldi.
Yeah, that episode where they're like in the barn.
Yeah,
and
was that Listen, or I always get that
is
there's all
Listen?
those.
I think it is.
I think it's Listen. Yeah.
And like there's those references there to the Doctor being the lonely child as well.
Mm.
And then we see that coming up with the 13th Doctor as well, and all that weirdness. So yeah, it's I feel like Moffat was already building his empire without actually being involved at that point.
Yeah, definitely. I would say then, since you've pinched that episode as your favorite of the season, that I will go one episode earlier and go with School Reunion, because obviously I think with the first season, they sort of were treading cautiously on using too many references to the classic series because they didn't want to alienate new viewers. We got the Daleks, obviously got the Doctor and the TARDIS, but outside of that, pretty much every element of that season was, well, I mean, we got that one offhand reference to the Cybermen. But other than that, it was a very easy, accessible season for people to jump in with. And then because it was such a success, they've clearly gone with this season that, okay, you know, let's start to bring back a few more elements from the classic series to reward those longer serving fans. And so, of course, we get Sarah Jane Smith popping up in School Reunion, which was fantastic. And you see it in David Tennant's performance as well, that clearly as a Doctor Who fan growing up, he's, you know, loving the fact that he's getting to act alongside Elizabeth Sladen. So, you know, we get K9 back as well. And it's just great. I mean, look, the moment where, well, there's two moments. The moment where the Doctor first sees Sarah Jane Smith when she gets introduced to him is fantastic. And it, I guess, is sort of his reaction to seeing her is sort of echoing how the audience who know who she is would be reacting as well. But then the second moment when she's stumbling around the school at night and sees the TARDIS and then the camera pans and he's standing behind her is just such a kind of goosebumps moment. And yeah, so it's just a really, which it's kind of funny because the actual plot of the aliens taking over the school isn't fantastic and doesn't hold up that great, but the plot with Sarah Jane Smith and the Doctor is fantastic.
Yes, I do like that also. Rose has been eating the chips and all of a sudden is a genius as well.
Yeah. And when, oh, sorry. Yeah.
No, and yeah, having Sarah Jane Smith there again is lovely because it's a nice throwback to the original series, and yeah, you can definitely tell that like David Tennant's having a ball filming with K9 and Sarah Jane.
Yeah, yeah, and you know we've got the whole dynamic of, you know, Sarah Jane Smith and Rose, where, you know, they're walking down the corridor and Rose is like, oh, who's this? And Sarah Jane Smith's just like, oh yeah, I'm Sarah Jane Smith. I'm sure the Doctor's mentioned me. And Rose is like, oh, hold on. Nope, never mentioned you. And so they've got that whole sort of territorial dispute going on. As Mickey puts it, it's the ex and the current missus kind of going at it. But then we get that pivot where they both start to talk about all the funny things that the Doctor does with the TARDIS, and they start to bond. And so it's a really well done sort of arc over that episode with how they sort of come together.
Yeah, it's nice. It is a nice episode. I mean, aside from Girl in the Fireplace, is it like it's really the dialogue, I think, in the script writing that is really, really good. But also the lavishness of the 18th century France. The other episode I really liked this season was the Christmas special, the Christmas invasion.
I was going to ask about that because it's obviously the first Christmas special that we get in Doctor Who. And, you know, other shows that do these sorts of holiday special episodes, they sometimes don't work quite well. They don't really fit in with the series as well. But, you know, so it was a bit of a gamble to try and do a Christmas special for Doctor Who. But yeah, it worked quite well. So
Yeah.
what were your thoughts on this one?
It was nice. I mean, we've then got to. It was an interesting episode because like the newly regenerated Doctor, and he spends 80% of the episode sleeping. Um, so it's really an episode about like Rose and her mum and Mickey. So we really get that nice like family side, and this is a very family orientated series. Like there's we see her mum quite a bit, Mickey's involved quite a bit, her dad. So we really get that like throughout the whole series. You get Harry Jones back, which is great. Andy Garcia as well as her assistant, which is great. But again, good dialogue, lots of funny lines. It was a great introduction to David Tennant as the Doctor, but then also not too much in your face, because I know when we were watching, not Sylvester McCoy, who was on before,
Colin Baker.
Colin Baker, when he regenerated, and it's like this full episode of him just being nutso. And it really just put me like not offside with that Doctor, but like I started on the back foot with his Doctor, because like he's trying to strangle Perry and being crazy. So like in terms of introduction to a new Doctor, particularly because I actually liked Peter Davison as the Doctor as well, was a bit jarring. So having this being like, oh yeah, here's a new Doctor, he's sleeping, and the aim of the story is like, how can we get him to wake up and save the Earth from the Sycorax? I think was really good, because then we got that monologue and the bits from the Lion King when he finally did heal or recover, and we get that like great introduction to Tennant, and like, okay, this sets the tone, this is going to be Tennant's Doctor. It's not too much, particularly for kids like us who or me, who wasn't like particularly I watched Doctor Who episodes here and there, but I was not like a super fan, and I was really impacted by losing Eccleston. So it was a nice, like this ease into it. He's a new Doctor. He's great, but we're not going to make him be nuts. So like, yeah.
Yeah, and I think it was funny with that episode that as fans, obviously having lost Christopher Eccleston, and I was the same when Eccleston regenerated. I was like, I'm set on. I'm not going to like the new Doctor. I liked Eccleston so much that no way. And so for all of this episode, we're sort of sitting there going, okay, but let's see the Doctor. Let's see what he's like. And we're kind of waiting. We're kind of waiting, and then we get it at the end, and it's like, oh, actually, like he's actually quite fun.
Yeah.
It's that sort of tease through the episode. Yeah, and it's building and we get to the point where the aliens are speaking, and then suddenly they're speaking English, and it's that moment of realization that, oh, hang on, what does this mean? And it's like that penny dropping, and it just built really well.
All he needed was a good cup of tea.
Yeah, and
solves all our problems.
I found it interesting, and I'm not quite sure the reason for it, because I'm thinking 2005 this was. I'm thinking 2007 because that's the Martha series. 2005, I mean, maybe Revenge of the Sith came out that year, but it's very odd that there's so many sort of Star Wars tones or themes to this episode, where the laser beam that destroys the Sycorax ship is very clearly referencing the Death Star laser. We've got the sword fight on the Sycorax ship where the Doctor loses a hand, much like Luke Skywalker. It's fun, but it's just interesting. I'm not quite sure what the influence or the motivation behind that was, but it worked. It was fun.
Russell T Davies is a special person.
I was thinking, just as you were talking about the fact that this season has a lot of emphasis on family, and having just talked about school reunion, and the fact that this season does seem to have a lot of reunions that take place with Rose and her dad, and then her dad and her mum, and Sarah Jane Smith and the Doctor. And it's almost like this season's about bringing everyone back together, only to at the very end of the season have the Rose and Doctor separated. So
yes.
I don't know if that's also a sort of a deliberate theme over the season. Even I mean, look, we'll talk in a second about least favorite episodes, but even in Fear Her, it's all about the daughter and the mother kind of coming back together after the father having left and then sort of moving on as a pair. But it's an interesting sort of theme through that season.
I get reunited with Cassandra and Face of Bo.
Yeah.
Which is nice as well. They're some great characters. So it was nice to have them back. I think, having that as like the first episode was like, oh hey, like it's still the same show and vibe. I need to stop saying vibe. I'm sick of saying it.
I think New Earth, bringing back a lot of the characters from that first season, was sort of a way of easing us in, of saying, okay, yes, it's a new Doctor, but here's all these elements that you'd be familiar with from last season.
I did really enjoy the end of the special, just to finish that up. When he brought Harriet Jones down. So good.
Don't you think she looks tired?
Yeah, such a good way to
which is
get people to question her authority.
It's an interesting sort of retcon of the last series, with Christopher Eccleston saying it's the start of the golden age of the British Empire, with Harriet Jones serving successive terms, and that doesn't really end up happening. We do get references to it, I think, in the Age of Steel. I think there's a comment about how it's Britain's golden age, and that Harriet Jones was the Prime Minister, I think. So it does sort of live on in that. But
before we get to episodes we dislike, I actually really enjoyed the Cybermen double parter. It was a bit silly at times, particularly like towards the end, with the Zeppelin and things. But other than that, that's a great two-parter. Like that's a two-parter that holds itself up for the whole 2 episodes. And it was nice to see the return of the Cybermen. The parallel universe, I think, was a great idea, and having
Pete come
Rose's
back.
Pete, Rose's dad be alive, and that how to navigate that between Rose and him, having Ricky, and that Rose's parallel was her mum's silky terrier, which was great. But yeah, I think that's a great two-parter, done really well. Was super interesting. And yes, unfortunately, we see parallel universe Jackie become a Cyberman, but that does leave it open for what happens in the finale.
Yeah, well, let's talk about episodes we didn't like, and then we can round off with talking about the finale. How about you go first? What was the episode that you disliked the most in this season? And I think it's going to be one that I'm going to debate with you a little bit.
I don't know. Like, there's a few here that I've never really engaged with. So like Love and Monsters is probably the worst.
Which is interesting. I actually, rewatching it this time, I actually found a lot in that episode that I liked. But I can understand why people don't like it. So what didn't you like about it?
We literally saw the Doctor and Rose for like 2 minutes at the beginning, 2 minutes at the end. And you did comment as we're watching this that we get very little of Rose and the Doctor together throughout this series. And that even though they might be traveling together, they're often on their own little side adventures. So like Girl in the Fireplace, where he's with Renette and she's on the ship with Mickey, wandering around. I just feel like this was just weird. Like, it was just a weird episode. You had the alien, the Doctor Who group trying to find the Doctor, and it was nice that they all came together like a family. They were all kind of lost souls, and through the Doctor were able to be united and find this friendship and form relationships. The group, like Linda, as part of those group members, were able to actually find each other. But then that alien comes along and absorbs them all. It's just, I was like, what is the point of this? Like, what is the point of this? And then it ends with bloody Moaning Myrtle's actress being liquefied and then coming back as like a pavestone, and there's like this kind of reference to, even though she's only got a mouth, they still find ways to get it on. And I'm like, please stop.
I think
Too much.
the fact this episode was received so poorly was because of the lack of the Doctor and Rose. But it's interesting looking at the next few seasons where we get Blink and then we get Turn Left and Midnight as sort of the way of doing this in the Donna season. I think I heard something where, I don't know how true it is, that essentially the reason was that when they were drawing up David Tennant's contract, they miscounted or they miscalculated the number of episodes. So his contract didn't let him do every episode. So they had to do this Dr. Light episode each season, which is bizarre, but I don't know if that's true.
Gosh, BBC, get some legal advice, please.
Yeah. But so I feel like this episode sort of gets stick because this is the first of those sorts of episodes where people were sort of like, but there's no doctor, like this doesn't really work. But
honestly, the no doctor factor was not the worst part of this episode. That was like the least of concerns. The whole episode was a weird mess. Speaking of British as well, we had Madame Delacroix as one of the Bliss.
Bliss, that's it. Yeah. I don't know. I think I didn't mind it as much because I found the humor from, like, I liked the whole stuff with Elton and Jackie, and I found some of the stuff earlier in the episode quite good. I agree that when you get the Absorbaloff monster thing and it's basically the same style of humor as the Slovene, which I didn't really like, which is sort of, it's not quite fart humor, but it's still like quite wacky and zany sort of stuff, which I don't love. And this was a Russell T Davies episode as well. So it's not as if it's some random writer that never got invited back. It's a Russell T Davies episode. And he did Boomtown as well. So, and World War III. So he does like that sort of humor, which doesn't really vibe with me. But I thought, look, I guess I give it higher marks purely because my memory of it was so bad. So it had such a low bar to exceed that it actually did do better on a rewatch.
I mean, yes, there are some funny moments, but it was like trying too hard to be funny, I think. So I really didn't enjoy it. And I feel like the vibe of it didn't really fit with the rest of the series either. Oh my God, I said vibe again. The feel of it was like, it was very left of field. Now I know which episode you really dislike, and I argue against that one as well.
And it's back to back with Love and Monsters. So Fear Her. Yeah, I feel like that second half of the season, I think the what's it called? The Idiot's Lantern wasn't quite as bad as I remember it.
I've never liked that episode.
Yeah, like you said, the second half of the season just had a lot of fine episodes. They weren't particularly good. They're not particularly bad. They're just not very memorable. But Fear Her, it just felt very, I don't know. It was just very weird. Like, I really like the concept of them going to 2012 to see the Olympics. Clearly, this was just after Britain had won the rights to host the Olympics, so they wanted to sort of capitalize on that. I found like the use of Kookaburra Sits in the Old Gum Tree or whatever as the song, it just felt very, it just made it feel very dated, and maybe that's my issue with it. And the whole concept of the alien being some lost little seed that's in the child, and she's drawing things to capture people. It all just felt very strange. And then you got the dad, sort of the menacing dad in the closet or something. It just didn't land with me very well. It just it felt very odd.
I don't see this feels like a Doctor Who episode to me, like compared to Love and Monsters. Like this made a lot of sense. And it's kind of interesting that they seem to keep ending up in London for significant events. So you talked about the Idiot's Lantern. So they're arrive in London just before the coronation of Queen Elizabeth II, and it's at bringing everyone together, and the alien wanting to then take away. It's very much the same in this episode. We've got large groups of people going missing. It's the same breakdown. People going missing.
Yeah.
Something's going. Maybe some person who's in their local community that's making this happening or aiding the alien. And then they use the coronation, where there's, hundreds of thousands of people watching the coronation to then feed the alien. It's the same thing with Fear Her. You've got the alien that's lonely, and we've got that in the Idiot's Lantern, the Wire is hungry. With here, she's lonely. With Fear Her, yes, I do think there's a lot happening in that episode, because then like she's drawn, like she's kidnapping the kids in her like local neighborhood because she's lonely and just trying to find that sense of family that the Isolas normally has, and the Doctor explains it's like millions and millions of siblings. And so she ends up stealing the audience and athletes at the opening ceremony of the Olympic Games. So yeah, very similar again to Idiot's Lantern. Yeah, I think the dad drawing was a bit left of field in him coming to life, but I feel like that could have been integrated better.
I wonder if that was because they didn't want it to be like the girl is the villain. They wanted like here's like an evil menace that it's not her fault. There's something else sort of lurking in the background.
But she drew the dad as a kind of a
yeah.
deterrent. So I feel like it's one of those things that her dad is like, obviously her and her mum victims of domestic abuse. And that's why
it's very dark.
It's very dark. Chloe feels really lonely, and that's why the Isolas went to her, and they're both like, that was the common bond between them. They're both lonely children. But then she does draw that image of her dad, and it kind of almost becomes her protector. So if anyone tries to stop, not for her protector, but like it's a representation of her anger. That's what not protector, bad wording, or it's a representation of her anger. And the fact that she's able to then defeat the drawing with her, and again, this is not necessarily to do with the plot, but she gets rid of the Isolas, but that drawing's still alive, and it has to, her and her mum have to then come together and have that bond, as you said earlier, to overcome that, which I think stops that loneliness. Obviously, she was feeling isolated after her dad's dead and after the domestic violence. Her mum didn't know how to deal with it. She didn't deal with it, that separation. So it like allowed them to come back together. So in turn, like the Isolas helped Chloe not become lonely as much as the Isolas, Chloe helped the Isolas.
Yeah. And I think you're right that probably my biggest issue with this is it does feel very similar to the Idiot's Lantern, and the fact that in Idiot's Lantern it's Rose that gets sucked into the TV, and in this it's the Doctor that gets drawn into the pictures. Yes. And it does feel like they're too close together to have such similar episodes, both set on Earth, both with significant events, both with, you know, things capturing people in the neighborhood. So I think that's probably the biggest thing with it. And I do find it interesting that we do get in this season so many episodes set on Earth, to then we've almost finished the next series with Martha, where so many of the episodes aren't set on Earth. We get the Lazarus Experiment and Smith and Jones, but other than that, I think until the 3-part finale, there's nothing set on in sort of modern day Earth. No. Whereas in this one, we do have, you know, we've got Love and Monsters, Fear Her, which is essentially set on modern day Earth. You know, School Reunion, not New Earth, but Christmas Invasion. Like there's a lot of episodes that are set sort of in present day Earth, which maybe by the end of the series, it just feels like it's starting to get a bit repetitive. And maybe that's my issue with it.
I know. I enjoyed Fear Her. I think it was good. I was also in London in the lead up to the 2012 Olympic Games. So like looking back and having all the, I mean, I know it wasn't filmed during then, but just that hype around the fact that London got the Olympic Games, that was very much there at the time. It's a nice kind of throwback, future predicting throwback. So
it would have been nice if they'd got David Tennant to actually carry the torch at the Olympic Games. I think that would have been a nice sort of tie-in. But yes. Well, let's sort of wrap things up by looking at the finale, the 2-part finale for this season. We get, I keep saying we're sort of interchanging between season and series, but we've got Army of Ghosts and Doomsday, which was, I think, the first time that we've really had the Daleks and Cybermen fighting each other on screen, which at the time I remember being really excited to see. We get, you know, as we've already said, we get Pete and Mickey coming back to help fight. You know, we've got Torchwood. So we've got a whole lot of different elements sort of culminating in this. And I think on the whole it does work as a finale. Like there's a lot of different elements, a lot of different moving parts, but I think on the whole it really works quite well as a send off for Rose. What did you think?
Yeah, I do really like this as a finale. I think it does work really well. I loved like when like again, good pacing. You know, the Doctor and Rose return, and talking to Jackie, and Jackie's like, "Oh yeah, it's ghost time," and the Doctor and Rose are like, "What is happening? How come everyone's just like, yeah, cool, this is fine, this is normal?" So, and then yeah, them getting taken by Torchwood and things like that. Like it was good pacing in terms of setting up for like Doomsday as the finale.
And good dialogue as well.
Yeah, it was well written episode.
Yeah, got all the
as
stuff
soon
with
as you saw the Cybermen, you're like, oh no.
yeah.
Like what's happened? How are these guys here? And then with the Void ship as well, like looking at it like now, like obviously upon reflection, I think watching it at the time I was like, oh, I wonder what's in there. I didn't make the connection. It's literally a Dalek spear. Like they've got on their bloody on the outside of their armor,
Their casing,
machine, whatever, their casing, yes. Obviously now looking at it, like it's so obvious.
But then I also love that inside the Void ship, it's the I can't remember what they call it. Is it the Ark or something? And they say it's Time Lord technology, and the Doctor's like, you know, what Time Lord technology? What is it? And then it's bigger on the inside, which I loved as a little sort of like, it was so obvious, but you know, not something that really got thought through. Yeah,
that was great. No, and I loved it. Like when Rose and the scientist are looking at the Void ship, and then Mickey appears behind her, and I was just like, oh gosh, what's going on? Like things are really, like something's really going wrong, because we've got Mickey back who somehow crossed through from the parallel universe, and then it all fits into place.
yeah.
No, I think it's a good episode. I love that the ghost turned into Cybermen and everyone then starts freaking out. And then you have the Daleks as well. The banter between the Cybermen and Daleks, fantastic.
Yes.
Lots of funny lines there.
And the Doctor with Jackie pretending to be Rose, and he's sort of you know talking about how she's good to keep around for a good cup of tea. Well, when I say good, it's okay. Sort of like there was a lot of I think David Tennant got a lot of good lines in this two-parter.
Yes. Yeah, and it was entertaining. So we did have Martha's cousin. And I mean that scene as well where everyone's downloading the news. Oh, was that from Sidemen? Was it a Sidemen episode or this episode?
That's a Sidemen episode, yeah.
Damn it, I got mixed up. Okay, never mind. Yeah, so Sidemen versus Daleks, which is great. And then like obviously the Doctor returning into the Void, good, makes sense. We get Peter coming across, and there's a good explanation for that the Torchwood on their side had created that technology. I liked the analogy of the breaking glass, as this is what's happening to the universe. It's nice to actually, rather than having the Doctor just saying this is what's happening, you actually get that visual as well for the visual learners out there. Yeah. Anything stands out for you? Oh, the reunion with Pete and Jackie.
Yes.
Which is very sweet, because they're like, "Oh, you're not the same," and then they're like, "Oh, come here."
And also, when she says, you know, you're not going to replace my Pete, and he says, you know, I'm very rich, and she says, that doesn't matter. How rich? Very. That doesn't matter. How very? It was very sort of typical. Yeah. And then of course we get the farewell between the Doctor and Rose, burning up her son just to say goodbye. Very emotional.
With
watching for
You
the
were
first.
like,
I
this
got
happens in
mixed
the
up.
next
I got
season.
mixed
I was
up.
like,
Yep. Because they go back to the exact same spot, so I got very mixed up with the end of the Donna season, where obviously he leaves the Metacrisis doctor behind. But yes, this one he appears to her as a hologram to say goodbye. Rose announces that there's a baby in the family. No, it's not her. It's Jackie who's pregnant again. But we get the doctor almost saying that he loves Rose, but not quite, and disappearing. So very sort of emotional end to the episode, sort of broken up with the appearance of the mysterious bride at the end.
Yes, I do enjoy the visual of like that breakup. I mean, we were watching it like when Rose is getting pulled in, and you're like, how does she get saved again? And for a second, I couldn't remember who it was.
Yeah.
And then I remember, wait, no, one of them pops back, who seems to just obviously father's instinct. He knew to pop back to grab her, even though he's not technically her dad. Whatever. That Pete ends up saving Rose, but in that parallel, that visual of the wall and Rose on one side and the doctor on the other, and like it's almost like they can still feel each other, but
which had been sort of alluded to or foreshadowed in Tooth and Claw with the doctor and the wolf. So we do have that sort of visual of the two sides of them. I'm going to knock my mic over. The two sides of the wall, and we get this again with the doctor and Rose.
Yeah, and then the poor doctor doesn't get much downtime. I mean, I guess he kind of had time to grieve Rose before he went and saw her on the beach. And then we had, Catherine Taylor's bride show up.
Yeah, which will be something we get to look forward to reviewing in our next review, which should be quite soon. Yes. We've almost finished Martha's series. So
yeah, we've got one episode left.
Looking forward to recording that perhaps in the coming days. But look, that's about it for this series, unless you had any final closing thoughts.
No, I still think series 1 was a stronger series. I really enjoy David Tennant as the Doctor. I just feel like him and Billy Piper are great together, and like they obviously have a great connection both on the show and off the show. But I think that romance side of things is coloring it a bit too much. And I know we're not reviewing series 3 right now, but that also then starts to come through in that series too. So I'm actually really looking, like, this was a good series. I preferred the bond between Eccleston and Piper over Tennant and Piper. Still a great series. I'm loving David Tennant as the Doctor as well. I still think Eccleston would be my favorite, which feels weird to say because I've always in my head been like, Tennant's my Doctor, but really it's not.
Well, I do have a hot take on David Tennant's the Doctor, which I'll probably save for our Martha review, because it's it's along those lines that Eccleston, on this rewatch, Eccleston is definitely shining through a lot more, but I'll expand on that in the next episode. But just before we go, I'll give this series a rating as well. You're welcome to as well, although I know you don't like to. But
I don't like numbers.
So the first season I gave a 9 out of 10 because I don't think there was any bad episodes. I thought it was a really solid, complete season. This one I'm probably going to give a 7 out of 10. I think its highs were really high and really good. So Girl in the Fireplace, School Reunion, those early season episodes were really, really good. But the lows were really low as well. So, I mean, as much as I don't think Love and Monsters was as bad as I thought, it does have its moments. And Fear Her, Idiot's Lantern, Impossible Planet, Satan's Pit as well, not the best of episodes. So they sort of just pulled this season down a little bit. So, yeah, probably a 7 out of 10.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good rating. I agree.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And thank you for joining me for this review, Lola. It was great to review the season, and we'll be back quite soon for the next season.
Yep.
So, thank you everyone for listening in. Links in the description for our Instagram and Twitter accounts. So do give us a follow, do give the video a like, try and share it around, and leave your comments. What were your favorite episodes of this season? What were your least favorite episodes? How do you think the season was overall? How do you find David Tennant as the Doctor looking back this, depressingly 15 years later since this season first went to air? Let us know your thoughts, and thank you for listening, and look forward to the next episode in our rewatch of the new seasons of Doctor Who. So until next time, see you later.
Bye.